Here it is. Biggest moment of a legendary career. Phil defeats Father Time.
Joining us is a legend in Houston sports journalism, the Houston Post columnist from 1977 to 1995, sports radio host at 610 and 740 back in the day, and the Channel 13 Extra Points panelist. Oh, my God, we know him from everywhere, and we're glad to welcome back Kenny Hand, who's currently the associate publisher for Texas Links magazine. So I thought Kenny would be the perfect person for some perspective on Phil Mickelson's unreal run at the PGA Championship. Great to have you back on the show, Kenny.
Robert, always great to be with you.
What was your feeling as you watched Mickelson on Sunday? I mean, that was just magical.
It was almost beyond magical. You know, Phil's gone through a lot of physical changes. He had weight issues, and now he's fasting at different times, 36 hours worth of fasting. I don't know if I know I couldn't do something like that as near as I am to Cleveland cafeteria here, but you got to give Phil a lot of credit on a number of fronts. He doesn't need the money to keep playing golf. It's all about achievement. It's all about reinventing himself, if you will. At the halfway point of the PGA Championship, I was rooting for him, but I had a lot of doubts if he could finish 36 more holes against the field of the young Turks that are out there. But you have to realize what Phil's done in reinventing himself. He's not svelte, but he's a lot slimmer than he used to be, and he still drives the ball really far. I mean, this is not some guy that's 5'7" and 150. I mean, Phil's a pretty big guy, and he outdrove Brooks Koepka, who's one of the longest drivers on the PGA Tour. Phil hit a 366-yard drive on 16. And you couple that with his incredible short game that he's always had, I think the best of all time. This incredible sand save that he had. And Robert, I think one of the most important shots and trickiest shots and critical shots to this whole thing is what people have overlooked over the last 48 hours. That little punch out from the native grasses, if you will, right off the green on 17. He hit his shot a little bit long in there, and it rolled into the native grasses, and that ball was buried in the native grasses. And Phil bogeyed the hole. That was his second shot. He punches that out and then is able to get a bogey out of it when who knows where that ball could have gone in any direction. If anybody's played golf before, if they saw that lie, I mean, that's not something that he can just whack out of there with his 64-degree wedge and take this wild big swing. I mean, he had to be precise like a surgeon in punching that out to a distance that he could two-putt and go on to the final hole. So what he did was absolutely amazing to me at the age of 50. And I think what Julius Boros did in 1968 in San Antonio, when he was 48 years old and was the previous oldest winner of a major, was also incredible. Julius had heart issues his whole life and was a little bit heavy himself. And what Julius did in San Antonio was something for the ages, really. He beat Arnold Palmer and Bob Charles down the stretch to win in 68. And a lot of people just thought, well, there's not going to be another golfer that is older than 48 that wins a major because, Robert, when you go back and look in history, a lot of golfers just didn't take care of themselves. I mean, they were either, heavy or they drank a lot, they partied a lot. And the modern day guys are really generally taking care of themselves and they work out. And so there may be another guy that comes along that's over 50 years old if they want to play that long. They won't have to if they win a lot of money, but they keep themselves in really good shape. And it could happen. Somebody could come along and break Phil's record.
I want to get back to what happened on Sunday in a second, but you saw Nicklaus at the Masters at age 46. I know you have vivid memories of that. Do you think what Mickelson did, was it as big as Nicklaus as an event or as a feat in the sport?
I think Nicklaus winning in 86 at the Masters will always go down as better than what Phil did because of the it was Jack Nicklaus. And no one expected Jack Nicklaus to tame Augusta like that and win the tournament. I think what Phil did is every bit as good. He was 4 years older, and as good as Phil Mickelson is, he's not Jack Nicklaus. And so I think what Phil did is at least as good as what Nicklaus accomplished. That's my opinion. Nicklaus certainly had people that were after him and chasing him in 1986 that were great players. I don't mean that. It's just that I think when Phil won this tournament, it really, really came out of the blue. I mean, he hadn't done much in a number of years. And Phil was 300-1 odds. So I can't remember what Nicklaus would have been at the Masters. I'm sure the odds were very high then too, but I don't think they were 300-1.
I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it was 5 years since Nicklaus had won his previous major. It was 8 years since Mickelson had won. It was 2013 was his last major.
Yeah, and I think the difference is that it was Jack Nicklaus. I mean, arguably the greatest golfer of all time. He put Tiger up there in that argument as well. But Phil is probably not still considered to be in the top 10 of all-time greatest golfers. I think he's certainly on his way to be in the Golf Hall of Fame. But I think he's probably on the outside looking in as far as the top 10. Nicklaus arguably was the best who ever lived. So it was an amazing accomplishment what Nicklaus did in 86. But again, that's Jack Nicklaus. And maybe, I don't know. I just don't think anybody saw this coming from Phil Mickelson except maybe his caddy, his brother Tim, and his family members and his coach and some of the close people in his circle.
I had to laugh on Sunday because as you were watching those last few holes, it couldn't have been more Mickelson. I think I said on Twitter, this was so Phil Mickelson because he's getting into trouble and getting out of trouble. He's in the crowd. He's in the water. He's in a sand. He's everywhere, all over the course on Sunday and just escaping time after time.
And you know what's incredible about what you're saying is that with the field chasing him, a lot younger guys, including Louis Oosthuizen and obviously injured Brooks Koepka, who's not yet back from his knee operation. He's still recovering from that and nursing that along. But these are very, very talented guys that are chasing Mickelson. And with all his foibles, you would think that somebody could have stepped to the fore and taken control. But that shows you how difficult Kiowa was as a test for the best players in the world. I mean, judging the wind, shifting one way or the other, and now it's different this day than the next day. And I was just so shocked that Phil just managed to keep his composure, managed to keep his focus, which he keeps talking about, how his focus is literally on keeping his focus. And he hits some amazing shots interspersed with what you're talking about. I mean, like, Phil, what was that shot he just hit? Then he comes back and hits this amazing shot onto a green that you're thinking, well, lesser guys would have been rattled by what he just did 2 shots ago. And that's not Phil, not that kind of guy. He doesn't he's never gotten that rattled, really, even if he's wound up losing a tournament and kind of lays dormant for a while and you never hear much from him in terms of the leaderboards for quite a while. But he still has plenty of ability. And I think he's tightened his swing up immeasurably. Yeah, he's still going to have some wayward shots. But over the last 5 or 6 years, it seemed to me like every time I watched him, I'm going, wow, has he ever been measured for a driver? Like he always looked to me like he was hitting maybe the wrong shaft or something because it was just always so far to the left or always to the right. I don't know how you can play that way. And I think he got really disgruntled with himself and his game. And maybe some of that's taking better care of his body and eating better. And as I mentioned, he's doing the fasting and all of this stuff. And I think it all combined there in this 1 4-day stretch where He was the old Phil Mickelson, the unbeatable Phil Mickelson, the Phil Mickelson that had the resolve that he did when he first started winning early on in his career.
If there's one thing that I wish is that we had a Tiger cam on Sunday, looking at Tiger's reaction as everything was going on.
Wouldn't that be priceless?
But I was thinking about this, Kenny. You know, everybody always has talked about the difference in electricity and magnetism between Tiger Woods and everybody else in golf. But I'm going to say this, and this is maybe just me personally, but I feel like Mickelson has as big a Q rating as any golfer that I've ever seen outside of Tiger. And I think the difference between Tiger and Mickelson isn't as great as it is between Mickelson and the other guys in golf. I was fixated by it on Sunday, and I think it wasn't just because he was 50 years old. It was because it was Phil Mickelson, too.
I think that had a lot to do with it. I also think it was interesting that it wasn't just Ricky Fowler or John Rahm or the current stars, the current guys on tour that are bigger names that hugged Phil after the round or tweeted if they were long gone from the course. But it was Tiger himself, the biggest rival that Phil had, and Phil could never overcome Tiger. Tiger always beat Phil. But even Tiger, who probably still doesn't like Phil very much, and Phil probably doesn't like Tiger very much, if truth to tell. But even Tiger, watching what we watched, had great respect for what Phil did.
What did you think of the crazy crowds, both in their enthusiasm and also in the crowd control?
This is absolutely embarrassing for the PGA Tour. There are no excuses why they couldn't have immediately apologized. Now, I'm not saying it took people by surprise. I'm not going to hammer them as far as their lack of security and being overwhelmed incessantly here because of the fact that it did take most people by surprise. Anybody that says they could have foreseen that kind of a throng intervening with both Mickelson and Koepka, poor Koepka and his caddy, you couldn't even see him. I don't know where they were for a while. Caught up in all those nut jobs, some of them drunks, obviously, been drinking all day. Who knows? You couldn't have foreseen the size of it, but you could have foreseen Mickelson's popularity going into the final day of a major like this PGA, trying to win, being the oldest player at age 50. They could have foreseen that and had a little bit more security. Going forward, Robert, they're going to have to deal with this. This isn't the first time that's happened, obviously. I mean, it's happened with Tiger's crowds several times. It's happened many times at the British Open. But this is just, this is scary. Okay, nobody got hurt seriously, but don't say that to Brooks, because Brooks sounded like his knee hurt quite a bit from getting jostled and shoved, and who knows what happened in that crowd. If they can't protect the two golfers that are trying to finish a round of golf, they're still playing. Think about this. This is what I thought about. I don't know about you. I'm thinking, can you imagine at an NFL game and the kicker's on his way out to the field to kick a winning field goal, and the crowd rushes the field behind him?
Yeah.
They wouldn't allow that. You imagine if James Harden's getting ready to shoot a free throw when he was playing for the Rockets in the playoffs, and all of a sudden they let all the fans spill out of Toyota Center onto the court behind him? What kind of nonsense are they allowing? Okay, it's not the first time it's happened, and nobody got – I understand all that, but they have got to beef up security. Ropes mean ropes, right? And, sir, you need to stand behind the ropes. They do that on the fairways, right? You don't see anybody coming onto the fairways while somebody on the 6th hole or the 8th hole, but they allow them to do this while the tournament is still taking. Look, Koepka still had a chance, albeit very slim. He would have had to birdie the 18th on about a 20 to 25-foot putt, and Mickelson would have had to three jack from 15 feet. But it was still possible. And you had these nut jobs out there. They just absolutely took over and overpowered. I feel sorry for the poor security and volunteer people that were there trying the best they could. They just didn't have enough. And so going forward, the PGA is going to have to address this elephant in the room, because it's not one elephant. It's a herd of elephants in the room.
It was even more surprising for me and that this is, still in a pandemic here. And you got all these people breathing on the players right on top of them, surrounding them, and they're all jammed up tight against each other. I get that people were a little bit more excited because they hadn't been out a lot the last year, Kenny. They were, seeing an event that was just extraordinary at the same time, and maybe you get caught up in that. But I agree with you. I think this is about the organizers, especially, we're right still in the midst. You feel like it's getting towards the end. And I get that, things have eased up a little bit, but we're still trying to get rid of this pandemic that everybody kind of seems to be forgetting about.
Well, exactly. And I go back to another thing is like on the fairways. Can you imagine? Would they tolerate 20 people coming through the ropes on a 6, 8 hole, the 13th hole of any tournament, not just a major? If they had 20 people that just went through the ropes and started trying to shake hands and commiserate with the players, they wouldn't allow that. There'd be outrage, but there didn't seem to be a whole lot of outrage on this. In fact, last night I watched the entire Golf Channel, everything I saw. There wasn't one thing from the PGA that said, "We're sorry. We apologize to both Phil and especially Brooks. It was a lack of planning on our part. We're sorry. We wish we had planned better. We will in the future." But they never apologized for that, what I think is a huge gaffe. And it's dangerous because we're living in a time where you don't know what's going to happen when you've got that big a throng. Maybe the only answer for Koepka was to try to, once he saw Phil's approach shot hit the 18th green, maybe he, in retrospect, should have just stayed put and not gone forward. But I don't know that he had a choice at that time. I think he was probably too far up the fairway and just got caught up in it, and there wasn't anything he could do. But let me tell you, if somebody wanted to hurt Brooks Koepka, they could have. It would have been hard to catch him because there are just hundreds and hundreds of people there.
The last thing I want to ask you about with this whole thing is just Phil Mickelson himself and his personality and who he is. And, I don't know how much you've been around him, but I'm sure you've been around him a little bit. Maybe people that have got a chance to interact with him. What kind of guy is Phil Mickelson? He seems to be a lightning rod at times. And you hear some people that, he's the worst guy ever. He used to be called a little fake as a personality and that sort of stuff. What's the real story behind him?
I think Phil's grown up a lot. I think maybe early on when I didn't know him that well when he first came on tour, but I think there was a lot. I think adolescence was a lot to blame for the perception of Phil being a little aloof or a little standoffish sometimes. I think Phil grew into the role that he thought he should have as a PGA performer, that it's more than just your golf. You have to try to be the best you can, an ambassador for the sport. And you have to try to have patience with stupid questions like I might ask him or other reporters might ask him. And I think he matured. And when Phil matured, I think along came the crowd that he never really would have had early on. I think he embraced people rooting for him rather than rejecting the job, so to speak, that it was to navigate through all the people, the autograph seekers, the well-wishers, and all of those things. And not just that, but the criticism of people in the crowd or the people in the media that said, "You'll never be Tiger Woods. You'll always be second to Tiger Woods." And I think it was just a process of not only growing up, but deep down, I think Phil Mickelson is a good person. My experiences with him have always been very, very good. When they had the Shell Houston Open here for many years, he was as gracious as he could be and answered every last question anybody had for him. Robert, this is true as anybody, that the fans and the media can pick their favorites. I like this guy or I don't like that guy. And some of it is perceived. Some of it may be true. But I think there was a perception that Phil was a little bit too big for the britches. Okay. And I never bought into that. I think it was just Phil. A lot of times fighting this perception that was more probably like reality, that he was just not as good as Tiger Woods. Well, who is as good as Tiger Woods? I think it took Phil a long time to come to terms with the fact that he was an awfully good player, future Hall of Famer, one of the best who ever put a golf club in his hands, but not as good as Tiger Woods.
Yeah, and unfortunately, everybody's about who's the best. It's kind of where we are. Before I let you go, I do want to ask you about Texas Links Magazine. Tell us what's going on over there.
Well, we're online right now. It's been hard to print. We haven't printed over the last year because COVID had a lot to do with that and where we could place the magazine. So we're still online and doing the best we can in that way. But we've been doing it for 15 years, and I'd like to hope we could get back into print. I'm just not sure. We may just have to stay digital only for a while.
Golf is one of those sports that you might have thought wasn't hit as bad with the pandemic because of, its very essence, I guess. There's only 4 of you going out and it's outside and the whole thing.
The thing about this last year that we went through with golf for the average golfer, with the social distancing, a lot of the public golf courses had to make these policies, and some of them are still in place. For instance, at Sharpstown and some other places here where you can only have one person per cart. And those are because of the COVID protocols, and they were enforcing those as they should have. So there was I think in a lot of golfers' minds, it wouldn't be as fun if they can't ride in the same cart as their buddy. But the more they got used to it, it's still the same opportunity to go out and have fun with your friends. And I think that's why there's been a renewed interest in golf. And a lot of the courses are having increased business just because people have been the ones who didn't play a lot last year are pent up and they're ready to go out and play. And I think what Phil Mickelson did is going to be good for igniting the interest overall that people have in golf. I mean, Tiger did it a lot. Mickelson, you always have to have somebody, either you love them or you hate them. You know what I'm saying? Is the Yankees in baseball. Well, now it's probably the Astros nationwide.
Yeah.
Isn't that funny? But you always have to have a villain or a hero, right? The people, well, I'm a Cubs fan, but I hate the White Sox, or vice versa, And so in golf, it's nice when you have somebody that's either loved or hated at the top.
Speaking of somebody that's loved, at least locally, did you notice Jim Nantz dropped in a little, hey, the oldest living golf major winner is his birthday. Yeah. And he or not his birthday, but he dropped his name in there, I guess, somehow in the final round. Did you notice that?
Jackie Burke?
Yes.
And Phil has worked, he's worked quite a bit before, or at least a little bit before, with Jackie out at Champions, and they worked on putting. And Jackie would tell Phil, he put a bunch of golf balls in a circle on the green and said, now knock them all in. You have to knock all of them in or you have to start all over. Jackie told me that story one time, and I said, Jackie, if I were lucky, I could knock in one or two of the putts and then I'd miss and I have to start all over. And he said, oh, you're not any good, though. But those are the Jackie Burks of the world. Those are the people that make the backdrop of golf fun, interesting. And look, the drama that we had with Mickelson, can he finish all 4 rounds at the age of 50 and beat this kind of field? Like I said before, I think some guy like Brooks Koepka, if he keeps himself in shape, he's 31. If he's got 19 more years to be 50, but a guy like Brooks Koepka is in good enough shape that if he wants to play when he's 50, there should be no reason that some of these guys that are studs now can't be on the tour if they want to be. And I'm not talking about the Champions Tour, I'm talking about the PGA Tour when they're 50. Having said that, like I remember this, Robert, years ago when I was covering the Astros, and Jose Cruz was in his late 30s, pushing 40, but didn't have an ounce of fat on his body. I said, Jose, do you think it's possible that another 10 or 12 years when you're 50, do you think you could still be playing in Major League Baseball? And never hesitated. He said, no way. And you know how slim and cut Jose Cruz was.
Sure.
I mean, So what he was saying is that in baseball and other sports, I mean, Tom Brady's an anomaly at 43, but there are just not too many football and baseball players that will reach over, 40 to 45. Nolan Ryan obviously was an aberration, and Joe Niekro, the knuckleball, because he threw the knuckleball, aberration. But the golfers have a better chance at 50 than many guys. And the guys in the contact sports, there's no way they're going to reach 50. Their bodies won't hold up. They keep getting hit. Of course, Mickelson and Koepka got hit in that crowd that you were talking about.
Yeah. I was about to say Koepka will have a long career as long as he stays.
That was a contact sport, Robert.
Yeah, as long as he stays away from those South Carolina crowds. And when I saw Mickelson on Sunday and everything unfold and it ended, and I thought, well, the first person that I would love to talk to about all this stuff is you, Kenny, and I can't thank you enough for coming on the show and talking about this. It's a real pleasure catching up with you.
Well, thank you, and I always enjoy talking to you, Robert.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Don't forget to follow Houston Sports Talk on Facebook and Twitter. Subscribe to us on iTunes, Spotify, the Google Podcast app, or the Stitcher app. You can support us by giving us a 5-star review on iTunes or by telling your friends about us. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.